Shameless, luminous, untamed truth. SLUT. In so many ways, our society is much more permissive of promiscuity and accepting of sexuality than it ever has been before. So when I started talking about sex publicly, writing about sex, and being open about my sexuality, I had one strain of thoughts that were like, you're making a big deal out of nothing. What you're doing is so tame compared to the other stuff that's out there in the world right now. You're fine. In fact, you thinking anything that you're doing is edgy? Ridiculous. The other thread of thoughts was like, oh my God, what are people gonna think about me? What would my neighbors think? What would happen to my job? What would happen to my friends? What would happen to my children's friends? What church would let me walk in the door? In the end, I think both voices are completely legitimate. One of the biggest social prices that I paid in this project is having it used against me whenever a conflict comes up. There are several examples of this, but one in particular that left a lasting impression was when I had a relationship that was bad enough that I went to court and stood up and detailed the sexual coercion and violence that was used against me, that I did not consent to, that was not part of my kink, and said that in a court of law to get a restraining order. The restraining order was more because of the emotional abuse, but that's not protected under the law. The only thing the law protected me for was physical violence and sexual coercion, which there was some, but it wasn't the most damaging of the things I experienced. It was just the only one protected. So I stood up in a court of law, recounted my story, and then a couple weeks later, when it was up for appeal and the restraining order was being reviewed, and my ex-boyfriend had an opportunity to defend himself. He just defended himself by saying, look at her website, look at her blog. She likes it kinky. You can't please a woman like that. She wants you to slap her around, and then she calls abuse when she doesn't like how things go down. I was glad I'd put so much of my thoughts in writing and I could document so much, and even more, I was glad the judge I had was a woman. It is extremely painful to have your sexuality thrown in your face when you're going to protection, for protection to the institutions that exist to protect us. So, one, I am super proud of myself for standing there. I was hardly there. I was mostly in an out-of-body experience, but I did walk myself into that courthouse several times. What did I learn? I guess through experience we learn more compassion. I could imagine standing there in court, but having done it, I know what it is when other women are put on the stand for their sexuality. And I now know many women who have stood in court and had their sexuality levied against them, and how much that reinforces the shame that we already carry. Every woman who stands in her truth illuminates a world in which women are valued, respected, and loved. Every woman who speaks out lights the way for us all.